The Steele dossier, paid for by Clinton and the DNC, was not Russian disinformation. It was British disinformation from Steele himself. Hello, this is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button. Today we're going to be talking about the Christopher Steele dossier again. He was a former British spy. He was hired by the DNC and the Clinton campaign to dig up dirt on President Donald Trump, then candidate Trump, to make him look like a Russian agent. Turns out none of it was true. He had tied Paul Manafort and Carter Page, who were members of the Trump campaign at the time. Manafort was the campaign manager, stating that Trump was a Russian agent, bought and paid for. Manafort and Page, they helped Moscow to hack the DNC and to put the emails onto WikiLeaks. The world didn't learn about these allegations until January of 2017, when it was published by BuzzFeed. And it was not for another 2 weeks that the FBI would finally interview the primary subsource that Steele used. Only then did the FBI learn that those allegations had serious problems with them. And it turns out that, for starters, that the subsource was not a well-placed source in the Russian government, but a paid-for employee of Steele's firm, Orbis, who then disputed the findings when he was interviewed by the FBI. This is a pretty egregious, I think, circumstance where the Obama administration was spying on the opposition party, the Trump campaign, in an election year on false allegations, and he used concocted intelligence that the primary subsource states wasn't even true. You can't make this stuff up. The allegations were eventually debunked by none other than Robert Mueller in March of 2019, but he left out this subsource interview that occurred in January of 2017. January 24, 2017, this interview occurs. He left it out of his report, and we wouldn't learn about it until the Justice Department Inspector General Michael Horowitz came back in December of 2019 and told us all about it. The FBI identifies and interviews the primary subsource in early 2017, and now these documents have finally been declassified by the Senate Judiciary Committee. Judiciary Committee releases declassified documents that substantially undercut Steele dossier Page FISA warrants. Now, the Carter Page FISA warrants, this was the basis for spying on the Trump campaign starting in October of 2016. It carried all the way through June of 2017. But the FBI and the Justice Department, they knew as early as January 24, 2017, that there were significant problems with their ongoing surveillance of the Trump campaign, then the transition, and then the Trump administration. That the whole thing had been very much made up by, I think, Steele himself. Now, according to the interview, Steele's subsource said that when he was asked in March of 2016 to look into Paul Manafort, then campaign manager, per the FBI, the source, quote, carefully asked around some of his friends. He said he may have asked friends and contacts in Russia, but he couldn't remember offhand. He added that for this topic, his friends and contacts in Russia couldn't say very much because they were, quote, too far removed from the matter. The source said when he was asked to get information from Russia on Trump, he was nervous, quote, nervous and cautious when asking around about the topic in Russia, but he felt like he had to report something back to Steele about it. So there was a little pressure to produce some information that maybe wasn't true, but he had to get the information back. As for President Trump's supposed encounter with prostitutes in a Moscow Ritz-Carlton hotel, the source per the FBI interview said, quote, he reported Trump's unorthodox sexual activity at the Ritz as, quote, rumor and speculation, and that he had not been able to confirm the story. Now, on validating the source material for the dossier, the source per the FBI interview said, quote, Steele pushed him to try and either follow up with people or corroborate the reporting, but he wasn't able to do so. Moreover, he added attempts at getting corroboration on these subjects made him uncomfortable. He was nervous about the Russians finding out about it. Meaning the source was not even talking to Russian intelligence directly, as Steele had alleged. He was evading them in pursuit of his own interviews. He didn't want to get caught by the Russians. Now, Steele, in the dossier itself, he had cited who he said the sources were. Source A was a quote, former top Russian intelligence officer. Source B was a, quote, senior Russian foreign ministry figure. Source C was a senior Russian financial official. Source D was a close associate of Trump. Source E was an ethnic Russian close associate of Trump. Source F was a female staffer of the hotel. And source G was, quote, a senior Kremlin official. Now, Steele had reported, based on this, that not only was Trump a bought and paid for Russian agent, but that there was a conspiracy, a, quote, well-developed conspiracy of cooperation between them, and that's the Trump campaign, and Russian leadership. This was managed on the Trump side by the Republican candidate's campaign manager, Paul Manafort, who was using foreign policy advisor Carter Page and others as intermediaries. The two sides had a mutual interest in defeating Hillary Clinton, and that this, according to Source E, he acknowledged that the Russian regime had been behind a recent leak of embarrassing email messages emanating from the Democratic National Committee to the WikiLeaks platform. The reason for using WikiLeaks was plausible deniability, and the operation had been conducted with the full knowledge and support of Trump and senior members of his campaign team. Now, it turns out there was significant problems with these allegations. On the core allegation, the source told the FBI in the January 2017 interview that, quote, the individual said that the Kremlin might be of help to get Trump elected, but he did not recall any discussion or mention of WikiLeaks. Now, according to Michael Horowitz, the Inspector General at the Justice Department, his report released in December 2019 summarized this same interview. Quote, the primary subsource made statements during his or her January 2017 FBI interview that were inconsistent with multiple sections of the Steele reports, including some that were relied upon in the FISA applications. Among other things, regarding the allegations attributed to person one, the primary subsource's account of these communications, if true, was not consistent with and in fact contradicted the allegations of a, quote, well-developed conspiracy. So this wasn't Russian disinformation, it was British disinformation from Steele himself. And yet, per Horowitz, the receipt of Steele's election reporting on September 19, 2016 played a, quote, central and essential role in the FBI's and department's decision to seek the FISA order. You can't make this stuff up. The FISA warrants, the whole basis for spying on the Trump campaign was the Steele dossier, and it was bogus. There was nothing to it. He had his sources, and if they didn't have anything, Steele didn't have anything, and the FBI didn't have anything. And that's really the truth of it. It was that you had made-up allegations, false allegations about President Trump and his campaign being Russian agents, that they hacked the DNC and put the emails onto WikiLeaks with Moscow's coordination. But it was just a fairy tale, a narrative that they were pursuing, a campaign talking point, a Hillary Clinton campaign talking point, fueled by British disinformation that was utilized to get FBI and Justice Department investigation of Trump that would not be wrapped up until March of 2019 by Robert Mueller, who himself debunked it and said that there was no coordination between Trump and the Russian government or any Americans. No members of the campaign or any Americans were responsible for hacking the DNC and putting the emails onto WikiLeaks. Now, the most telling of the disclosures, though, I find is a separate New York Times article that Peter Strzok, a former FBI agent who is leading the Crossfire Hurricane investigation into Trump, he had an annotated version where he was commenting on what he said was basically false allegations from the New York Times. Quote, Trump campaign aides had repeated contacts with Russian intelligence. Now, Strzok challenged the central premise, stating in the document, we have not seen evidence of any individuals affiliated with the Trump campaign in contact with intelligence officials. We are unaware of any Trump campaign advisors engaging in conversations with Russian intelligence officials, end quote. Recent interviews and investigation, however, reveal Steele may not be in a position to judge the reliability of his subsource network. So when they did the subsource interview in January of 2017, Peter Strzok had already debunked the Steele dossier. They knew that it was fake, and they kept on going back to the FISA court to get renewals on this. So their central assertion when they went back to the FISA court through June of 2017, months removed from the Subsource interview, when they said, quote, the FBI believes that Russia's efforts to influence U.S. policy were likely coordinated between the Russian intelligence services and Page and possibly others, they knew it was most certainly false. So if anything, the outstanding question is whether any crimes were committed by the FBI and the Justice Department when the inaccurate warrant applications were submitted to the FISA court. These were discredited and disgraced institutions now. The FBI, the Justice Department, the FISA court, they should just throw the FISA court out. We need to totally reevaluate the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. If it's going to be used to pursue political allegations in a campaign context by the incumbent party against the opposition party in an election year, we've got serious problems. And I think that what they did here has wrecked the peaceful transfer of power. They were blindly pursuing false allegations of treason, and then they secretly carried over the investigation into the Trump administration after the election in an attempt to decapitate the new president politically and legally. I say it was a failed coup, and I'll leave you with the close here. Now we are only beginning to learn the extent of the damage to the Constitution and the Republic, both of which may be beyond saving. If former Vice President Joe Biden, who knew all about these investigations, if he's the one who wins the election, I think that all bets may be off. He has no interest in pursuing it and to find out what really happened or to hold anyone accountable for what Obama and Biden had authorized in January of 2017 when they carried this investigation over into the Trump administration. There should be hell to pay, but if Joe Biden wins, don't count on it. That's the commentary. This is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and have a good day.